Takno, Coach Treb, Karl, Kelra, maglalaban yung M4 Echo at saka MSC EXE. Ikaw ang coach ng M4 ng Echo nung nanalo kayo. Ano sa tingin mo mangyayari? M4 Echo laban sa MSC EXE.
Sa tingin ko mangyayari doon, puro clash
Tingin ko yung game maabot ng game 7 para sa akin.
Siyempre kami, bugbog sa amin yun. Prime naming 5 yun eh. Nila Chakno, tsaka magandang laban din yun kasi Chakno versus Yahweh.
Tingin ko M4 pa rin. M4 kasi M4 Echo kasi sobrang ganda talaga si Yahweh nun manghuli. Tsaka wala talaga nakakapigil kay Yahweh.
Bakbakan Pagalingan umuli tapos pataasan ng patient kung paano tapusin yung game.
Kasi parehas malakas lalo na pero tingin ko yung mananalo talaga din yung M4 Echo kasi parang prime namin lahat yun Tapos sobrang meta namin nun. Pero tingin ko din kaya sumabay ng Mega lalo na yung laruan ni Kelra nung time na yun sa MSC talagang sobrang palong siya pati si Chakno. So hindi natin alam ano pwede mangyari. Pero tingin ko M4 Echo.
Feeling ko bubugbugin ni Chakno si Yahweh nun. Pag prime versus prime.
Ilang point? Ilang score? Ano score?
Maano siguro? 4-1.
Siguro lang. Sige, gawin na natin game 7 para exciting.
Mabilis laban, matagal.
Siguro sa dalawang game medyo tatagal pero pas game yung dalawa.
Draft nyo, laban mo si Pakbet.
Kalaban si Bakbet. Tingin ko 50-50 Pagalingan ng taga sa player Sobrang lupit din talaga ni Bakbet mag-drop nung MSC sila.
Ano pala mo?
Andre po.
Andre, sino manalo? EXE Echo.
EXECRATION ako.
Jack, sino manalo? EXE Echo.
Para sa akin, feeling ko, EXECRATION
Yael, Richard, Remiel, Rafael, Dwayne, sino panalo? EXE Echo.
Echo.
What's up? Got another episode of Throwback Throwdown coming your way. You guys loved the first bout. Wait till you see this one. This is any team, any era, any region, best of 7. It's your little MLBB dream match in one small package. At your service, my name is Leo. For this episode, we brought in a special guest. Come on in.
Hi, I'm Special.
Manny's our guest. Say hello to Jose Ingan. How are you, man?
Doing great, doing fine, and I'm prepared to argue with you.
All right, perfect. Today is going to be a bout of champions, both Filipinos once more, because looking back at the past few years, when you're looking at champions, there's mainly Filipinos.
Only one region, Philippines. Yeah.
There's some. I mean, there's Malaysia and Indonesia that won. But right now, it's the MSC 2021 champions, EXECRATION, going up against
MPL PH S11 champions, M4 champions.
All right, so we'll start off by running through their achievements up to that point. Again, this is MSC EXECRATION from 2021 and M4 Echo from late 2022, early 2023.
Yeah.
Because that was a weird M series. So first up, before MSC, EXECRATION went to the grand finals in a 7-game series against Blacks International. And oddly enough, this is a surprise to me because I look back at their recent history. They won quite a bit. MPL Season 7, they were in the grand finals. MPL Season 6, they were 3rd. MPL Season 5 and 4, they were 4th. So in hindsight, EXECRATION has always just been a consistent team.
Yeah, it seems like they're like RSG for the past 3-4 seasons of MPL. Always consistent top 4.
That's a good comparison. Talk to us about Echo.
Echo. So far, Echo, we all know S10. They went up against Blacklist. Lost, was it 4-2?
It was 4-2.
4-2 against Blacklist, but regained their momentum in S11. Swept Black Series in the grand finals. Swept, right?
Yeah. So that was in the same 6 to 9 month span.
Yeah.
So Echo really had their year going. So with that, we'll run through the lineups now. MSC 2021 EXECRATION had Renzio in XP, Etomax in mid, KLVJ in jungle, Chaknu in Rome, and Kelra in gold. And then they had their 6th man, Zapno.
Yeah, and for Echo, of course, we have the San duo, XP and mid lane Sanford and Sanji, Karltzy, the GOAT in the jungle, Yawi as their roamer, Benny Cutie as their gold laner, and of course Daddy JP as their 6th man.
They had Karltzy with them at M4. He did not play, but best believe he was on ground alongside a few other members of Echo at the time. Echo Loud, Echo Proud, if you know. So let's talk about their strengths right now before we go lane to lane, before we talk about what this hypothetical matchup might look like. And real quick, as a disclaimer, we are isolating the metagame. We're taking out hero pools, we're taking out specific patches, because we want to really just dig into what this bout might look like, regardless of all of that, because the game's always changing, but you cannot change the player, you cannot change their natural game and their IQ, so that's that. Real quick, strengths. EXECRATION here is super unpredictable. Even as far back as Season 7, Season 8, the likes of Coach Panda, you can quote me on this, said, I don't want to face off against EXECRATION, then Omega, they would turn into Omega eventually, because when you think they're going to do something, they're going to do something else entirely. So if given the chance, most teams would rather fight a more predictable, more logically sound team, and I think that's what makes EXECRATION so dangerous. EXECRATION is also super good in the late game. That's why there's something called the EXE timers, the Omega timers eventually, which was around the 18-minute mark.
Yeah.
Regardless, it's still the late game, right? For an MLBB match, that's a really long time into game duration. So they had that late game advantage. They were so good once the game went long. And this goes into one more strength, their comeback potential. Like, as long as the base stands, literally, as long as the base stands, as long as they haven't lost it yet, even if there's a chance, even if the opponent had all of their turrets left and all 5 members of EXECRATION are still on the map, they can win. And I think this comes down to one of their last strengths here, their mechanics. Like on a lane per lane basis, like give them any hero, give them under any meta, EXECRATION players are second to none. So I think that's one of their main strengths in general.
Yeah, for me, they're the definition of one set is all you need to turn things around. No matter late game, 18 minutes up, one set.
Just one moment.
One moment.
It's over.
One big moment, yeah. And for Echo, it's really a huge contrast to what you were saying about their strengths. For me, Echo is the definition of early game. That's why they coined the term Echo Express. Because when they get their groove in the early game, their momentum, snowball, it's over. Honestly, it's over. Looking back at their matches, normally, majority of their matches don't even reach the 18-minute mark.
They don't have to.
Mark. They don't have to. It's always 12 to 14 or around 16 minutes. So their early game snowball potential is really high. Once they get their groove, they're done. And apart from the early game is, of course, their macro supremacy. For me, especially early to mid, because you know what happened during one of the few seasons where Yawi was playing the split push backdoor play.
Yeah.
Wherein they didn't have minions, but they called that they were gonna tank the crystal damage.
Oh yeah.
And just go for the push.
This was season 10.
Yeah, literally the base got nerfed. The game got nerfed.
They
because of
changed
that.
it.
And I even talked to Umi about it. He mentioned that a lot of game changes happened because of this 5-man players from Echo back in MPL PH S10, S11. And last but not the least, I know you can't add the heroes, the draft picks, but for me, their drafting is superb. Drafting supremacy for Echo because they have Karltzy, one of the smartest players, not just in game but outside of the game, as well as Treb, which is now in Falcons AP Brand.
For right now, but
for now.
In this hypothetical matchup, it's still Treb and Tic Tac at the helm. So
yeah, okay.
You're right. I think we can count in the fact that their coaches are capable of doing that. So if you're gonna do that for Echo, you have to consider that you have Pakbet.
Yeah, and also Chakno. Honestly, Chakno's one of the smartest people.
Chakno and Pakbet, like those
Chakno,
two together
Pakbet.
can see things crazy, but you're right. If it's drafting alone, Trevor's got that blitz draft. So okay, that's a strength. Let's talk about weaknesses now. Let's look back at what could possibly stifle these two teams on their way to victory. Number one is how perfect. I just mentioned Chakno and Pakbet. They can get too creative. EXECRATION, the way that they played all throughout, leading up to MSC.
Yeah.
Sometimes they would try things oddly enough. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. Season 7, in the playoffs, they pulled off the, I don't know if you saw this, folks. If you haven't yet, we'll put up a clip here. Selena, Bane, Faramis. There you go. Talk about game-breaking strats. Pakbet pulled that off, and I was on the desk with Rockhart or Renmar at the time, and we couldn't understand what we were seeing. And then it was ridiculous enough to win a game over Omega at the time. It was ridiculous, but there's that. And then they also have a handful of other drafts that don't make sense. Yeah. So sometimes cheese isn't enough, and sometimes they bring out half-baked strats. So that's dangerous.
You know, honestly, you can also add that right now they just released the Gatot Mamba in MPL PH.
It's the same DNA, right? It's still under Chakno. So for now it might work, and then eventually they might try something too crazy. Might be outdated, might be ineffective once teams figure it out. So that's still there. Even then in EXECRATION, they were a little too creative. Next up is late game. Again, we mentioned how they're strong in the late game. Exit timers, 18 minutes. Sometimes you just don't get there. Sometimes teams just know how to finish the game. At 14, at 15, it's over. There's no chance of coming back. And of course, unpredictability. It's one of their strengths. It's also one of their weaknesses. Sometimes, you know the saying, how will my opponent know what I'm doing when sometimes I don't even know what I'm doing?
Yeah.
So there are times where in EXECRATION, they play for the late game, and then they don't even know how to get out of the early game or the mid, and then they just lose.
Yeah.
That's why it's dangerous to be a comeback team. And really, it does come down to those moments, and those are the three main weaknesses I think that EXE has.
So for me, Echo, their weakness, it actually benefits a lot EXECRATION. Because
Okay.
for example, you said that the late game is very strong.
Late game lang.
Now for Echo, they tend to have over-aggressive, overextension plays, especially with Yawi. Yawi's great, really a great guy. Same with Chakno. One more set, they can turn things around.
Right.
But sometimes it can be used against them. And you were saying that how would EXECRATION reach the late game? Really just prioritizing or waiting for the right moment, or waiting for their opponents to, you know,
Make mistakes.
punish, over-aggressive plays. And I think Echo was really prone to that during that time.
Even in the absence of Yawi in a post-Yawi world like now with JP in, sometimes you would see Karltzy force these kinds of moments too, right? Like he would just say, no, just keep fighting, we're gonna find it. You're right. A team like EXECRATION would definitely punish that.
Yeah. And you would actually know why they're like that, because again, they're really momentum-based game. They like the snowball. They're really after the snowball. So their over-aggressiveness really is in their DNA. Like you can't take that away from Echo. And another for me is over-reliance on having a winning lane matchup, specifically for the gold. Because I went back the matchup for M4, Blacklist versus Echo.
Benny Oheb.
They really prioritize the winning lane matchup during the drafts for Benny QT. Because it's hard to go up against the likes of Oheb, the likes of Kelra, if you don't have a winning lane matchup. Again, they're very, very self-sufficient gold laners, all three of them actually. And the moment that Benny QT doesn't have a winning matchup, it messes up the rotation. Again, Yawi, one of the aggressive roamers, loves to go around the map, but if he's stuck with babysitting the gold laner, it stops the momentum of the Echo Express.
So on paper, they have to have Benny at least be a 50-50.
Yeah.
Like if they get any less than that, whether it be through mechanics, through the map, or through the draft,
Yeah.
might be a tough time
Yeah, tough time for sure.
for Echo. All right, so those are the weaknesses we laid out for these two teams. Again, MSC 2021 EXECRATION and M4 Echo. How about we go lane to lane this time around? Let's go lane to lane. We'll start from the top. XP lane. I hate it. We're starting with a tough one. Renzio versus Sanford. We mentioned the Sansan duo earlier.
Yeah.
Sanji and Sanford. That's one of the main strengths of Echo. But I'm talking to all the members of the Lupon, of EXECRATION, even the Barangay. Omega fans would know because Renzio did hit a peak at the time. You just had to be there. You just had to be there to understand what the showstopper Renzio was capable of. So on a lane-to-lane basis, just one-on-one, isolating everything else, I'd like to argue that maybe Renzio can do it. Maybe Renzio wins.
Over Sanford. But it's
What do
a
you
close
think?
fight though. I honestly agree. It's a close fight, really close. But I have to lean towards Renjo also. At the same time. For me, Sanford has his moments. Again, has his game-changing plays.
Especially with the team.
Yeah, but there you said it. He works well, or he works really around the system of Echo. For me, if you take out Sanford in the ecosystem of Echo, it's gonna be a different Sanford. Unlike Renjo, where you place him in a different team, he's still the same XP laner. That could get a savage, especially for the previous meta.
That's right,
And
season
today's
9.
Meta, not sure, but season 9 meta, yeah, for sure.
That was crazy. That was the showstopper Renzio at his prime. But you're right. We can't just call it that. And as much as I'd love to say, you know what, Renzio wins.
Yeah,
All in.
really close.
You have to consider that it's a team game.
Yeah.
You have to think about all the other lanes. So we'll call XP lane a wash. We'll move on. How about mid? Etumax versus Sanji.
For me, it's not as close as the XP lane matchup. Sanji wins.
You're right. I think it's the other way around this time because Etumax relies on the team so much.
Yeah.
He's so used to shot calling and dictating where and what they can do, especially with the help of Chaknu.
Yeah.
And Sanji, you can quote me on this, a lot of mid laners, even from around the world, would say Sanji's a genius.
Yeah.
Sanji will do what you think he does or what you think he will do, and then he does better. It's something else entirely. It's so hard to lane against Sanji. Sanji's a genius.
Yeah, honestly, one of the most underrated players. He's not underrated in the sense that he's not recognized, but he should be recognized more.
Yeah.
Like, at least top 3 in today's meta. In today's,
Ooh.
internationally, not just MPL PH.
That's why Echo, well, now Team Liquid PH is one of the titans of MOBB. Let's move on. Mid is a win for Echo. Let's move on to the jungle. Kelra VJ, the king, versus Karltzy, who at the time was called the Prodigy. And then now he is the young goat.
The young goat.
Where do you see this going? This is the rhetoric, by the way. Nothing against Kelra VJ because I know what the answer is. It's just...
For me, automatically it's Karl, but it's not as close as Sanford and Renjo, but not as far as Sanji.
That's right.
Yeah, for me, it's like that.
Because Kiel has some longevity in him. Kiel, at his peak, had amazing moments. His mechanics were second to none. He was one of the first few back-to-back MPL champions. And when you compare that vis-a-vis to Karltzy, who is a 2-time world champion right at this moment, right, M4, and who just arguably still today could be called the face of MLBB.
Yeah.
I can't say Kiel. I love Kiel, all right? Kiel is amazing, the king, but Karltzy wins on the lane-to-lane matchup.
For me, to give credit to Kiel though, I think his main advantage over Karltzy is mainly his hero pool and at the same time his willingness to adapt. Because I've seen Kiel even during MDL Season 1, Season 2. He was, I believe, a mid laner that time, not a jungler. He was the one that put out the Lapu-Lapu mid lane, those crazy kinds of picks, you know, the creativity of EXECRATION of Omega instills with Kelra VJ really. So, in terms of draft hero pool, I'd give it to Kelra VJ, but of course, Karltzy, young goat. Enough said.
Karl wins the lane. That's another for Echo. Let's go to Rome this time. Huge contest here. Yawi versus Chaknu. The Playmaker versus the Mamba.
This might be the closest for me.
You know, I'm gonna call it now. We're willing to call this a wash. Why? Why exactly? Chaknu has possibly the highest game IQ in all of the game right now. If I'm not mistaken, the only Hall of Legends inductee that has not won a championship yet.
Yeah.
In MPL. And in hindsight, you think that he'd only just play roamers, right? Think about it. Chaknu, Cho, Grok, Kufra. He
Now
won. Sure, just last night after recording. But looking back, I rewatched MSC. My brother. He won MSC with a Diggy. That's not very Chaknu-like, but he did.
Only Chaknu.
See, Chaknu has a very deep hero pool, and that's not to talk about hero pools because we're isolating that. But just think of his playstyle. Think of what he's capable of.
You know, I think I have a good analogy for Chaknu. He's a mixture of Venus and Yawi.
Smack dab in the middle.
Yeah, in the middle. Do you agree?
Well, tell me why you think that is for Yawi. What does Yawi bring to the table?
For me, Yawi brings, of course, first off, they both bring a lot of good execution, a lot of good rotations. They dictate the pace of their own team, of the game.
But
again, he's prone to more mistakes compared to Chaknu for me. Which Chaknu really punishes the opposing roamer. If the opposing roamer gets too comfortable, gets too aggressive. So those are the difference. Like for me, discipline really matters in this game, especially in today's meta, wherein it's a 5v5 sport. You can't solo carry a game.
And likely there are moments when Yawi will look like he's trying to do a 1v5 thing.
1v5 things, yeah.
But if he's got you, he's got you. That's what's scary about Yawi. And it's because of that drive and because of what he's capable of, he's changed the game. I think that's what you were alluding to early on. Like a lot of nerfs, a lot of adjustments in game were because of Yawi's playmaking, because of how Echo follows through. So that alone, I don't think there's an argument here. We can't say for sure. What do you think? Go into the comments below. Let us know. What do you think? Is it Chaknu or Yawi that wins the lane here? Well, that will call it a wash. Let's go to the gold lane this time around. Kelra versus Benny Cutie.
For me, right off the bat, prime Kelra.
This is MSC MVP Kelra.
MSC MVP.
Versus, oh wow, M4 MVP Benny.
Yeah. But for me, okay, this is the difference. This is why it's hard to not take into consideration the meta and the time. Because way back then, especially the time of Prime Kelra Execration, it's easier to carry. It's easier to be like the focal point of the offense, like be a star player with 4 solid role players. I'm not saying the Execration had 4 solid role players, but that's the analogy. It's easier to carry. If you put Benny Cutie's prime during that time, I think it's neck and neck between Kelra and Benny Cutie, because Benny Cutie could for sure carry during that time.
But here's where I think Kelra should win the lane. Kelra was carrying hard. A lot of the times that Benny Cutie would do great Benny Cutie things is off of the back of his team working with him. Kelra, again, you drop him into a 1v9, he will win the 1v9. We've seen that, and with many different heroes. That's why I think we should really isolate the metagame, isolate the hero pools, and just look at mechanics. Not that I'm saying Benny Cutie can't beat Kelra, it's just even at his young MSC 2021 state, Kelra was just outshining most people, save for one. I think there was only one really that he could not beat at the time, and that's Oheb.
Oheb, especially during Season 8. In Kelra's own words.
Not in Kelra's own words.
Okay, in Filipino, he said that dinudurog siya ni Oheb sa laning stage. In English, it's like, Oheb is dominating Kelra in the laning stage.
He was crushing me.
He was crushing
So if this was Kelra versus Oheb, different story, but I think Kelra wins this lane to lane.
You know, for me, Kelra is more like Yawi, and Benny Cutie is more like Chak.
But here it matters more. Like it affects the game a little more because you're carrying.
But one thing I'd give the edge to Benny Cutie though is one, minion management, wave management, and positioning. Because of course you can't give a lot of credit to Kelra for position because he goes in. That's basically Kelra. He's always in the middle of the fight. That's how strong he is. That's how good he is. But in terms of macro gameplay, especially during team fights, I'd give the edge to Benny Cutie. Honestly, really, in those high stakes pressures. But 1v1, Kelra wins.
Lane to lane. So that's one for EXE. Looking at the total, you got 2-1. Echo wins mid and jungle, and then Execration wins the gold lane, and you got a wash in XP and roam. How's about we look at what the match looks like from a phase to phase, early, mid to late. Early game, I think it's clear.
Early mid.
Early mid.
Echo.
Goes to Echo. I will not doubt that. They have such an aggressive start. More often than not, they're able to end up with drafts that just do well there. That means, I think you will agree with me here, late game goes to EXE.
Late game. Actually, looking back at the stats, Echo's long games, they tend to lose the long games.
Yes, that they do.
That's statistic.
Even today. Even in Season 14 in 2024, you go 36 minutes, they get punished some way, somehow.
They get punished, yeah.
All right, so early to mid goes to Echo. Late game, if they can get there, goes to EXE. How about game duration? You can go from your shortest possible game to your longest. What I'm seeing here is Echo can win in like 11 and a half minutes. Like that's as fast as Echo can go. Longest though, where EXE can win and really just go the distance, we've seen him go really far. We've seen him go almost an hour. But yeah, exactly. I think 35. Like you can go 35, bordering 40, and then you can tire out Echo, and then X is gonna do EXE things.
I'd have to agree with you. 11 minutes, 12 minute mark. That's really Echo's game. I think it's gonna be if these two teams matched up. I think the mid game end, we'd see rare times or games that it would end in the mid game. I think it would just be the early game or the late game, where early game Echo wins, late game Execration wins. But I do agree, 35 minutes in, Execration will win.
That's your ceiling.
Yeah, that's the ceiling, that's the mark for sure. In 35 minutes, last minute, Chaknu has to do something, and he will do something for sure.
And you have to consider, Yawi might not allow that.
Yeah.
And it's not that easy to get Echo because they're also very good at dispersing. So I hope we painted a picture well enough in your heads for you to buy into what we're selling here. Let's talk about the score. Who wins? What is the verdict, Ingan? Echo from M4 versus Execration 2021 MSC. You got a score? It's a best of 7, man.
For me, 4-2. The breakdown is like game 1, game 2 will go to Echo.
That sounds very Echo.
Game 3, game 4 would go to Execration.
So you give the Lupon, you give the barangay a little something like, oh, they're doing it.
Yeah, and game 5, game 6 would go to Echo. But for me, Game 5 would be super fast because that's how Echo plays.
Pow!
Whenever they lose as a game or 2 consecutive games,
Yeah.
they would come back stronger and faster.
The next one.
Yeah, it always happens.
And then game 6.
And then Game 6, I think it'd go to the late game. But with the current score and with the current pressure, Echo would win.
Echo just.
Yeah.
All right, so you're 4-2. I, on the other hand, would go 4-3. And here's how it goes for me. Echo takes game 1. Execration takes game 2. And then this is where the views start to rack up. Like, this is where you start to hit like 500K, right? Imagine all the
Everyone's spreading
fans.
the word.
Right? Like, we're time traveling. They're playing, right? And then Execration goes for one more. And then Echo wins another. Echo wins another. And then Execration takes another. So you're at 3-3 now. And it's that last game that goes 40 minutes.
40 minutes.
Game 6 goes 40 minutes. And then game 7 ends at 15. Like, it's a fair 15, 16-minute game. But Echo wins. Like, in the end, I think Echo wins because say what you will about individual potential to carry, but it's still a 5v5 game. Echo is still more capable of many things, especially on a logical basis. Like, if you're expecting a mid-length game and not like a super ultra late game comeback moment, Echo can serve up. Echo can do it. So 4-3 Echo for me.
I have a question actually.
Yeah.
In terms of the series specifically, who do you think would be the game MVP?
Oh, that's a good question.
For me, I think it's going to be Sanford.
You think 40?
Yeah, it's going to be 40 because he's going to dominate the opposing XP laner. And at the same time, I think this is the game that will prove Sanford can carry regardless of the meta.
Okay. I, on the other hand, would say Kelra and then a silent MVP in Etomax. Like, Etomax can force these games to go longer, seemingly, but I think Kelra will still be the MVP if some way, somehow, Echo does fold to Execration. But that's it for Throwback Throwdown. What do you guys think? We're in agreement that Echo from M4 would win. Do you think Execration from MSC 2021 would do any better? Let us know in the comments below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let us know what other matchups you want to see here on Throwback Throwdown.